Well, what do you feel when you hear that story of Bartimaeus? Do you experience a sense of euphoria, perhaps? Yay, miracles happen. Jesus can fix physical imperfections. It's wonderful. Jesus can fix me. Yay. Or do you experience despair, perhaps? What am I doing wrong? Jesus hasn't fixed me yet. Or perhaps you experience a sense of emptiness, a sort of sadness, that nothing like that can possibly ever happen today. Miracles don't happen, actually, anymore. Well, I thought I'd bring Jesus into church today, so to speak, to see if that perspective could shed a little light on the matter and help us to see what this story might be about. I know it's a bit unusual to bring Jesus into church. In fact, it's a bit risky, really. Perhaps if we could hear Jesus actually speak about this incident report, we might not even recognize what he says as being him at all. And that makes me a bit nervous, because we're not always welcoming to people we don't know well, and we don't actually know Jesus very well. We're cautious about people who turn out to be different from what we expect them to be. And the Jesus of history is likely very different from the Jesus of the church's stories about him. Well, you know I'm not actually going to bring the physical man called Jesus into church, but I do want to consider the story we've just heard from the perspective of an earthy human Jesus as best we can, from someone with wisdom to share about life and community, rather than from the perspective of the more traditionally church-risen Christ Jesus, the divine one who can change the course of nature that we often hear from. It seems to me that in church, we most readily abandon the man Jesus on the Golgotha hillside and look back at the 30 or so years of his life from a place of virtual reality. It's as if Christ is the avatar we play with, that we've built on to the historic person of Jesus. We've become such good gamers, as it were, in the virtual story that we find it very hard to identify the difference between history and metaphor, the individual and the collective, miracles and healing, even between Jesus and the Christ. And it is the Christ that has come to dominate our interpretive perspectives when we hear the stories drawn from Jesus' life, such as this one about Bartimaeus. And that's not surprising, really. Thanks to Paul, the Christ-obsessed convert, the spin doctor, who offered the hearers of his own day and those who followed an emphasis on protest against structural injustice, redistribution of wealth, the possibility of peace, and the celebration of diversity. We owe Paul a heap of thanks because it was him and his obsession that was instrumental in creating the myths that embrace the man Jesus. And you've heard me speak about those myths before. Those big stories about life and healing, creation and salvation. Those big stories that still have the power to change lives today and which are at the heart of the church at its best. So let's join the story where blind Bartimaeus is sitting on his cloak at the gate of Jericho amidst a crowd and meets Jesus. Scholars say there's no evidence of historicity in this story. But that doesn't matter, because it's pointing us towards a significant truth, the kernel in the story, the kernel in the myth that surrounds Jesus and makes claims that he can change lives. To help us understand the truth in what is often discussed as a miracle story, there's a few interesting features. Oh, there's lots, but let me just pull out a few. Bartimaeus is a curious name, meaning son of Timaeus, or son of poverty. Bartimaeus asks to see again. The Greek translates literally as he looked up rather than received his sight. And this one I think is curious. The crowd was trying to double his disability by making him mute, as well as blind in the story. And then Jesus has this different word from the one we often hear. Jesus tells Bartimaeus to go, not to follow. Bartimaeus was disobedient at that point. This story, told by Mark with all its interesting allusions, comes at the end of a long journey through towns and villages where Jesus has once more been teaching crowds as well as disciples. Sometimes interpreters locate it in the genre of allegory rather than a miracle story. And when it's an allegory, we assign our places within the story amongst the many allegorical features, such as those I've just pointed towards. And then we ponder our behavior. Well, it's not unuseful. I mean, we often put ourselves in the place of Bartimaeus and wonder what we'd ask Jesus for. That's a good thing to think about. But what if we consider it as a parable, a piece of wisdom teaching from Jesus, such as we are invited to do by contemporary Jesus scholars? Then we come to Jericho, where we find Bartimaeus yelling at Jesus. Jesus, son of David, shouts and shouts. And a tired Jesus, who's been working for a week or more, says to him, "What more do you want from me? What do you want from me now?" Or words to that effect. "Let me see again," Bartimaeus replies. The earthy, human Jesus replies to this apparent loss of vision with words that say something like, "Go. You know all you need to know. The vision that you want to rediscover is out there amongst the people." He might have added, "Go and have a look and see what you can see." As with all good teachers, Jesus tells Bartimaeus to go, to get on with his own stuff. Jesus, doesn't want just followers and perpetual students hanging around. He wants people who can see what life is like, who can see what really is going on around them. And he's looking for people with a vision of what can be done to make the world a better place, and people with the courage to act on that vision. Seems to me, many of us need to rediscover our vision of a more kind and generous world, to recapture our courage to get on with the work of building relationships, giving a voice to those we all too frequently silence, and generally to start living in ways that demonstrate we believe the world can be a better, a kinder place. "Go," says Jesus, the wisdom teacher. "Look around, see what you can see. You know what needs to be done. Get on with it." He might say to us today, stop being perpetual students who hang about attending this lecture and that, this workshop and that, accumulating more and more information. Important though that is, it's good to understand. Rather, go, he might say, and ensure the structures of society are not racist or promoting racial discrimination. Insist on a fair distribution of the wealth we have. Do all you can to support efforts to manage climate change. We all see things differently. We all need to focus our eyes. We all need to sharpen our vision. We all can. Sometimes we need glasses to help. Sometimes we need to increase the capacity of our touch and our hearing and our smell and those other senses that help us to see and understand. And I want to say to you, if you need a miracle, and we all need one from time to time, then remember this. Jesus, the wisdom teacher, encouraged his followers, ordinary people, to have faith that ordinary people, like us, have enough insight into our own social situations to know what needs to be done to make them places of respect, compassion, and well-being. And that we can find enough courage to bring necessary change about if we support each other rather than silence each other. And what's more, that the vision of a creative future is to be found in the diversity of our community as we learn to live and work together. In all these places, we see the face of God. Miracles still happen.